Hey, what is going on, everybody out there? This is Jakejames Lugo. Welcome to the channel. Hopefully, you guys are doing all right. And welcome to a brand new episode of the Definitive Discussion Rebooted, the reboot of my Definitive Discussion podcast series that I used to do back in the day. It's back again, brand new coat of paint, a whole bunch of great topics, and a whole bunch of great guests, too. My last episode, I had Mundane Matt on the show. We talked about audience interaction on YouTube and, just entertainment in the media in general. If you haven't checked it out, I highly encourage you guys to do so. We deep dived into a lot of stuff with that. There was a lot of good food for thought overall. But as always, with each new episode, I get a new guest and I get a brand new topic to discuss. So I got Amanda VanHiel, who is the new on-camera news host over at Zelda Universe, because today she's going to chat up with me about the Legend of Zelda series. So Amanda, welcome. Thank you for coming to chat with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I always love getting to talk about Zelda.
Yeah, definitely. This is going to be dope. This is going to be fun. The easiest way to start this off is that obviously me and you both play a lot of Zelda. We played a lot of Zelda games. I know that I've written a bunch of reviews and other content about the Zelda series. You obviously have been on camera on YouTube and have talked about the Zelda series in a number of different ways and stuff. So you played a bunch of the games. What is your most one thing that you could think of that's like your one personal connection to the Zelda series? Because I have a couple, but I'm curious about yours. Like, what's the reason why you love the Legend of Zelda so much?
So my first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time, and I really fell in love with that. And I always just enjoyed the series because I just really like the adventure. I actually had the Zelda theme played as the recessional at my wedding.
Oh, really? That's dope.
Yeah. And so, I think at this point it means a lot because of all the friends I've made through the series, especially after being in Zelda Universe for 5 years now. Some of my absolute best friends are from the site, so we actually get to meet up every now and then. So that's really, it's just all the personal connections that I've created with people are because of Zelda.
That's pretty cool. Now, what is it about Ocarina of Time, though, that's really good? Because obviously a lot of people say Ocarina of Time, probably one of the best Zelda games in the series, probably arguably one of the best games ever made. And I think there's a strong argument there. But what about it for you specifically is Ocarina of Time? Because I know how great Ocarina of Time is. I mean, played it on the N64, but probably like you and like a lot of other people, obviously on 3DS with the 3D remake and stuff. But what is it about it, that game, that's so special?
So for me, that was my first ever Zelda game. I was 12. I got it as soon as it came out. I saved my money. My dad took me to KB Toys so I could go buy it myself. So there was that. It was the sense of, I earned this game. I bought it myself. This is mine. And I fell in love with the characters. I used to get in trouble at school for reading my Zelda book instead of the assigned reading because the assigned reading bored me to tears. I'm going, I don't want to read this. This is crap. I want to read Zelda.
That's hilarious. That's dope. But for me personally, again, I have a very rocky history with the Zelda series. I mean, both positive and negative, good and bad, of course.
Yeah.
So that's with everything. For me, starting off with the good, obviously, I have a lot of respect for the series. Even though I wasn't always die hard into Zelda, I played a lot of the games, not just for work, but also for pleasure. Again, I love Ocarina of Time. I have a lot of respect for Majora's Mask. I think that The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening is also one of the best games of that era when it first came out.
Oh, I love Link's Awakening.
And again, you have to really respect also Zelda on NES, because just the way that game was designed, it was so different from a lot of the other classics at the time. Again, that was during the era on the NES when Mario or Super Mario Brothers was really dominant. And you had a lot of other third-party games where platformers were really kind of the mainstay of that system. And then here comes The Legend of Zelda, which is more like an action RPG that totally turns things on its head. And that's just something that, both as a historian, as a critic, and as someone that's a connoisseur of video games, you have to really kind of tip your hat and really nod to. And I think a lot of people feel the same. Do you feel somewhat similar?
Yeah, definitely, because it's different, and that's what Zelda has done really throughout the years. With Ocarina, that really set the precedent for adventure games as a whole. That was one of the most influential games of its era, and it's the reason we have Twilight Princess, because to me, Twilight Princess is pretty much the same as Ocarina, just bigger. Ocarina was kind of the prototype of it, and then they just expanded from there. And so that's why I have so much respect for the series. And it's, like you were saying, with the NES, that's very different from every other game, all the Mario games, all the little fun Capcom games where it was just run, jump on this thing.
Yeah, platformers for the most part.
What? I'm sorry?
They were platformers for the most part.
It was
Again,
all
Mario
platformers.
and all those games. Yeah. There was a lot of platformers of that era. And I think that's because that's what worked at the time. but also it was just also the moneymaker because these were simple games. These were simple games to develop and simple games to put out, especially pretty fast. Granted, high level of quality for that day and era, because obviously Nintendo had an iron grip on the gaming industry for good reason at the time. But here comes Zelda, which again, from Miyamoto, one of the great innovators of the industry at this time, still to this day, because he's still alive, but totally turns things on its head and offers an experience that's just like you spend a lot of time with. Granted, again, there was a lot of stuff that we come to learn and understand and really appreciate in the series later on that they were still kind of like in their primitive stages, the open world, the ability to go to kind of like quote unquote any dungeon at least that you want at that time, as far as like exploring around and stuff. Secrets, which obviously Zelda NES had a lot of secrets to it. There was a lot of good stuff there that was really kind of like setting the groundwork for what we have now in this day and age of gaming.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a really big risk that they took because it was so different from everything else. It wasn't just a guaranteed, because if it were just a plain old platformer, it was a guaranteed just win right there. But that exploration to it is really what set it apart. And I definitely admire just no, we're going to try something different and we're going to see how it does. And if it works, that's awesome. If it doesn't, oh well. But it worked, and it worked very well. And I think because it was just so different is what made it work so well.
And word up to Miyamoto, because he's even talked about this in interviews and various different places about how it was really just him kind of like exploring, in the woods or like walking around the woods or going to caves and stuff. And that's really was like the basis of it. And that really translated well to when he put into the game, because again, it's all about exploration. It's about going places that you don't know what's there. It's just kind of like peeking around. And that's something that's like a trait that's stuck with the entire series, even up to now with Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch.
The whole thing is all about exploration.
Yeah. Like, it's just like to a point where now I feel like it's kind of like exploration on steroids because of just the size and the scope of the world that you get from something like Breath of the Wild. But even in some of the earlier games from like Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, even to Wind Waker and stuff, that's always been a consistent thing throughout the years for the series.
That is true. And I think another thing I really like about that is because Miyamoto has such a personal connection is what made it really effective, because it's not like somebody who had never explored anything before. It was, okay, how did I envision this? Like as a little kid going through, what would I imagine was going around?
Very relatable overall. And I think that's something that resonated with a lot of people. And that's why, or at least one of the reasons besides everything else, why the series is so popular. But one thing I want to actually kind of dive into is story. And this, to me, it's one of the more rocky parts of the series because, granted, there's the whole timeline thing that we kind of have with all the different games of like where the placement is of certain games, of certain events, which gets very confusing. Unless you have the Zelda Hyrule Historia, or at least the Zelda Encyclopedia, you're going to be somewhat lost, besides just playing the game straight like that. But also, I think that the Zelda series, to me, has taken a very slow process to evolve with its storytelling. And I feel like now, with Breath of the Wild, like it's kind of matured to a level now that we're starting to get like voice acting, which I feel like was something I've always said that Zelda needed voice acting for many, many years, because it was always cinematic. It was always well presented. The visuals look fantastic. The models and the characters look awesome. The events are pretty dope, and you really want to follow them and stuff. That was like the last little missing ingredient that I felt like would have taken this thing to a whole new level. But I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree on that, because that was like my one complaint when I was playing Ocarina for the very first time, is going, why don't they have voice actors in this? Because it was the N64 era, so that was highly possible because they had it in like Star Fox and
everything for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah, and so to me, I'm going, okay, why is this subbed? But okay, whatever. I think it definitely would have increased the game or given it more. I don't know how to word it. It just would have made it better.
Yeah, more pizzazz overall. But like,
yeah,
to me,
there you go. Giving it more pizzazz for sure. It would have made it stand out just a little more. Not that it really needed anything to stand out, because it already did, but it would just make it that much better.
Oh, for me, I felt like a lot of that was like the product of just Nintendo's stubbornness. Like, I understand the philosophical reason for it. That I think that both Eiji Aonuma, I think Miyamoto, and a couple other people have talked about this that have worked on various Zelda games, where Link, not having a voice is basically the player kind of like injecting themselves into all the experiences, which is very understandable. That's like a very kind of like book/novel thing to do. You see that in even contemporary novels, where it's just like the way that the characters are written. There's certain things about them that just aren't there because they're kind of just the traits that are kind of injected perspective from the person that's reading it, and I get that.
Right.
And for me, I always looked as Link as just his own character. I never really looked as Link as just like that avatar, kind of like in the same way the Persona series that, if we're talking RPGs, that do like very similar types of things. But for me, I always felt like, again, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and even I would argue if you kind of, for whatever reason, if you remade like a Link to the Past, even though we have a Link Between Worlds, which is kind of like a remake, but if you actually full one-on-one remade Link to the Past and gave it like the Octopath Traveler type of like approach to it, having voice acting with that would have just made those games just like so phenomenally more epic than what they already are.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, it's just ridiculous to me. Like, it'd be awesome. And again, especially more the modern Zelda games from like Twilight Princess on, or even Wind Waker on, because I feel like Wind Waker would have been fun with voice acting.
Oh my gosh, yes. I would love for Wind Waker to have had voice acting, because Wind Waker was just all about fun, just period. It was so happy. I loved that game so much. Like, if you just wanted just a truly just fun Zelda experience. That's what I always tell people. I'm going, what if they're new to the series? They're like, well, what would you recommend? I'm going, okay, what kind of game do you want? Fun? Do you want an adventure? Do you like things darker? If you just are going for something fun, and then go for Wind Waker.
Well, here's the thing also I think we should also touch on is that because there's two different types of Zelda games, I feel like. There's the ones that are more adventure, more action, and they're still fun. And I think all the Zelda games in some respect have those elements to them. But then you have the more, serious quote-unquote games that are in the Zelda series, which are like your Ocarina of Time, your Majora's Mask, your Twilight Princess, which are kind of, in some way they're kind of skewing more towards darker in some respects. And they're looked at as more serious compared to like something like Wind Waker, which is very bright, very colorful, very goofy. Yeah, there's all these like different things about it that are very different. They kind of, even though they're still great games, they have their own little kind of like stuff where people kind of feel a little bit divided on. Like, to you, which one do you feel like is the better one? Because I don't see really a difference between them. I feel like they're all still Zelda games in their own rights, even though they take different approaches. Yeah,
so that is really hard. I mean, I actually was thinking about this the other day. I was trying to rank the Zelda games, at least my top 5. And I mean, I was happy to go into like really just the tiniest details as to what I liked better. As far as entertainment value, I feel like Wind Waker definitely is the most entertaining of those. I'm not counting Breath of the Wild, because right now that just wins hands down for everything.
Yeah, it just came out.
But like, if I were going between like Majora's Mask, Ocarina, like Twilight Princess, and Wind Waker, of those, to me it would be, I think Wind Waker and Ocarina are the two top ones there. I mean, they're both very different. That is hard trying to decide.
It's a difficult thing to kind of like, really kind of navigate, because I think the better way to kind of approach it and then you kind of like window things out is to look at the worst. Like, for me, one of the worst things about Zelda, or at least in the entire Zelda series, was the time stuff from Majora's Mask. That's like the only Zelda game that I always kind of harped on that, because that really impacted my enjoyment when I first played the game. And then obviously years later, I've played it multiple times throughout the years, and I've had a better appreciation and understanding of like why things are the way they are, especially like when it got re-released on 3DS. But
I'm so happy with that.
I mean, it's very hard to kind of
totally
say
get what you're
the
saying
worst.
as far as like the time thing, because anytime there's a time limit for me, I get really nervous. Even to this day, like ever since I was like a little 5-year-old playing a video game where they would like start running out of time, I was itty bitty and I just start crying because it would make me so nervous. Now it's still like I feel my heartbeat racing anytime it was like, you have like 3 minutes to do this. And even though I could easily do it like in a minute and a half, like just the fact that there's this countdown there is like, is getting to my head. So that's what I would had to kind of look at. And then I had to keep going back and forth of, is it because I like this game, or is it truly a better game? This is another hard thing.
Definitely. And I think obviously outside opinions kind of affect it as well, because obviously everybody that's out there that talks about Zelda or just talks about games in general, The Legend of Zelda comes up in discussion. And for a lot of people, it's very trendy to say that certain games are like the best, or like that's their favorites and stuff like that, without even really truly understanding like what made those games so special, especially for the time frames when they came in. The better way, I think, to really kind of like say like what's the quote unquote worst, because I don't think any of the games are really bad. And I'm not even talking about the spin-off games. I'm talking about mainline Zelda games. Like not like Triforce Heroes, not like Link's Crossbow Training or anything random like that. I mean like legit like
the real games.
Like the real games, like the worst aspect or the worst characteristic would probably be those time things from Majora's Mask. But other than that, the rest of the game is phenomenal.
Yeah, that was probably the drawback to Majora's Mask. The big drawback in Wind Waker to me was just riding around trying to find those
The sailing.
Triforce shards. Yeah, that got a bit. Once it started getting tedious, it's when it was just like, okay, no. For Skyward Sword, my problem was the imprisoned. That was just, and the game just went on for way too long.
Do you feel like the controls also impacted Skyward Sword specifically? Because that's the only Zelda game that I could think of besides like the spin-off game stuff like Link's Crossbow Training that has motion controls. Because I always felt like, playing a game like that just with just regular controls, it'd be like a standard Zelda game that's just phenomenal to play or just great to play.
Yeah.
Like that.
So that is like one that I feel like everybody's kind of split on. If you didn't have any trouble with the motion controls, then I think it worked well. But some people, for whatever reason, had a harder time. I had a harder time with the motion controls, especially anything that involved holding it steady, which my hands shake naturally. So I think that was my issue with it. So I feel like had it been like just a regular controller, it probably would have done much better. But because it took energy to play Skyward Sword, like my arm would be sore afterwards. Like I work out regularly and like my arms were still sore after playing that for a while.
You're going to be making some gains playing Skyward Sword. Watch, somebody's going to try that one day. That's going to be hilarious. But also, I think I want to kind of dive into something else that is very interesting is that the lore behind the Zelda series. Like, all this extra stuff that we see, in various different parts of the game that we get little tidbits of stuff, about the goddesses, about, all the different types of like baddies that we see throughout the series and stuff. There's this outside lore that kind of ties in to some of the main events that happen through each game or in their own individual stories. But there's like a bigger thing almost at play in some respect, especially when you look at the timeline stuff that you see in like Hyrule Historia and the Zelda Encyclopedia or all these other supplemental material. It kind of like builds up this stuff that people really get behind and stuff. I mean, do you find yourself like really kind of like diving into stuff? Obviously, because of your stuff at Zelda Universe, I mean, it would obviously be something that's like important to you, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I always like looking at the lore and the characterizations. I really like to look at the characters and analyze those because I'm also an actress. So like anytime I can like really tear apart a character it just kind of is one of those things I just naturally do. I just start just tearing them all apart, going, okay,
Break
why
them
do you
down.
Yeah, I do like massive character breakdowns. But yeah, because I like to know, I really like origin stories. So that's what I liked about Skyward Sword is it kind of gave you a foundation of, oh, so this is why this is here and this is why this is here. And it also gave like opportunities for more theories. And I think it's fun to theorize because, I mean, that's just using your imagination. And Nintendo pretty much says that they pulled the timeline out of their butts. So if you want to come up with a theory that is totally off the wall, then by all means, you're just using your imagination and having fun with it.
Now, did you ever feel like at one point, or at least at some point with the Zelda series, did things get a little bit too convoluted? Like, to me, I always see it with a lot of other gaming series that go for a long time or have a lot of entries into them. The biggest example being like something like Kingdom Hearts, where things just kind of get so chaotic, or at least there's so much injected into it where there's like things become a little bit too complex or a little bit overly complex to the point where things become convoluted. Did you ever?
Yeah, I still don't understand the timeline completely. I still get all like, if you tell me if you told me to like just go down the timeline, I would just be like, I need my Hyrule Historia right now because I'm not going to get that all straight.
Like, I love the complexity. Like, again, I love the idea of different timelines where, it's like a legacy of the hero that's like passed down from like generations and generations.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that's appealing. That's cool. Where I think that people sometimes get lost, obviously, with the timeline split between
exactly like there's like 3 of them.
Yeah, and then you start injecting because I think one of Nintendo's mistakes, in my personal opinion, was like having some of the spin-off games become canon to parts of the timeline where it's like Four Swords, Triforce Heroes, and a couple others that are like part of like specific events predating certain main entries of the series. That's when I feel like things start to go off the rails.
Yeah, that definitely made things like the Skyward Sword having that at the beginning made it easy because it was just, this is just at the beginning and they basically made it an Adam and Eve type story there. So there wasn't anything too convoluted there, but like once you get past that timeline split, that's where it's really hard to keep up with what goes where, like especially the really older games, like, oh, this is where the first Zelda was, this is where Zelda 2 was, and this is why. I'm going, okay, that's nice.
So here's one good point that I think that's a great way to kind of like, wrap everything nicely with this discussion.
Sure.
Where Zelda should go. And I feel like, for me, we've seen concept art, we've seen supplemental material that never really made it into any of the games, with the exception of maybe the bike in Breath of the Wild. I want to see Zelda go into the future. And I feel like we've had so much of like this, like, you know, this fantasy oriented stuff, which again, Zelda is still primarily action, adventure, fantasy for the most part. But I feel like, you know, seeing those ideas, it makes me more curious about what a futuristic Zelda would actually be like. And I think like that's
that's like, cool about like the city in the sky and Twilight Princess.
But I mean, like, even more so, like, actually having, like, full-on technology, like, sci-fi almost.
Oh,
like,
that'd be cool.
To an extent of, like, okay, so, like, you have, like, the bike, right? Which is, again, it's technology. It's like, it's a bike. It's a motorcycle. Or whatnot.
Yeah.
But having, like, stuff like, you know, not just the Guardians as, like, technology and, like, shooting beams and, like, magic and stuff, but even just having full-on technology. Because I feel like, at one point, I think it was part of the original NES Zelda concept, was actually having a futuristic take on that world. And I think, like, that would be something that we never really seen before, or at least, you know, full-on seen in like its full like entirety, like that would be really interesting. I think like where the series could go next, and even do like more crazy over the top things while still maintaining the same type of like stuff that makes the Zelda series itself.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I think that would be a lot of fun. I would totally play a futuristic Zelda. It would just be a very new take. It would be very different. And I think ultimately where they need to go is just what has made a lot of the recent games stand out are the characters. Not so much Link, because he's, you know, the main character. But all the NPCs, you become really invested in them. I know I became really invested in them in like Breath of the Wild. Ocarina was one where I really...
The running mailman. I think it was in Majora's Mask. Right? Like,
where it's like, you know, there was Saria, and there was Nabooru, and Ruto, and all those great characters.
The mask guy, the mask salesman, even.
Yeah, and the happy mask salesman, like, and then like Big Goron with needing the eye drops. Like, no, I was going to get him some eye drops. I was not going to let his eyes burn anymore. Like, I was truly invested in that. And I think that is ultimately, no matter where they set it, which, because futuristic would be so cool, as long as they maintain those characters that we all love and care about, that's gonna make it a successful title.
I agree. I think that obviously the world, the exploration, the way it looks is one part of it, but really the stories and even the sub stories. Because again, I keep going back to Majora's Mask because that had the most sub stories.
I mean, that game was just pure side quest for the most part. I mean, of course, it had dungeons, but it's the side quest in that one, and it was all about the characters. You wanted to take care of them.
Yeah, there was a lot of drama there. There was a lot of stuff that you could follow that still had like a beginning, middle, and end on top of like the bigger narrative with like saving the world and stuff, which I really think was like one of the hooks, at least, that kept people going back to it and kind of redoing all those days again and again and again to see all the different outcomes.
It made the stakes a lot higher with wanting to save the world. It was like, no, this isn't just about me. This is about everybody here.
Yeah, but the way, to me, like having that type of approach, and even from some of the other games like Ocarina, I've even like Link to the Past and stuff, and some of the other games as well, like that same type of approach could be translated to like pretty much any type of Zelda game that they can make, no matter what worlds or setting that they put it in, as long as like that and the exploration and the ease of the gameplay is just still solid and good, which I think that Nintendo obviously understands. They've been doing it for like over 30 years practically at this point. They understand what's really good. So I feel like if they were really kind of taking in that wacky direction like that, it would still do gangbusters because people would still appreciate it.
Definitely, because as long as it has just that Zelda foundation to it, it would do very well for sure. I could totally see that happening.
Now, what is like one thing that you feel like you want to see, you know, evolve as far as like an attribute? 'Cause to me, I want to see more voice acting. I want to see Link get a voice. Like, I'm one of those people where I understand the argument against it, and I understand it being like one of those things that, again, it's an avatar for the player, it's a link to the game for the player themselves. But I always, again, like I mentioned earlier, I see Link as his own separate character. I would love to see Link.
That's all I've always said is like, no, he is an established character. He is somebody. He's not just you. He is somebody that actually interacts with them, and I don't know, that already has like to me, he's more than just an avatar. He is an actual established character. He has character traits that, I mean, that's why he's going with like the Triforce of Courage. That is something about him that was already there. The person playing it may not be leaning towards the Triforce of Courage. They may be more towards power or wisdom. So that's why I would like to see him have a voice. He does have very strong relationships with the different characters. I'm like one of those annoying, huge Z-Link shippers where I want Link and Zelda on screen.
Okay, for the record, those two, I say that Link and Zelda should get together. This whole courtship thing's been going on for 30 plus years. We all know what's really good.
So hard in Skyward Sword, it was not nice. They
look at Breath of the Wild. We all see that look that Link's giving Zelda. We all know what's really good here. Like, I would love to see them explore that.
Happening when that screen turned white, but I just wanted to see something to confirm it.
I would love to see like different things like that be explored a little bit more, obviously because it'd be a little bit different, but also it still maintains not only the reverence for the entire series and the legacy of it, but also it just, again, we see these characters not only as in like interesting and new lights, but we still maintain like their essence. We still maintain like what's fun and what's good and why we love them so much and why, you know, they're just fun to go back to again and again and again, and why why a lot of these games are so timeless. I think the majority of Zelda games are timeless, either all the way back to the NES, the Super Nintendo, and throughout all the different Nintendo consoles. You could always kind of like put that on in some way, even if it's just a port, and still play through that game and still get like the full effect of what it has to offer.
Absolutely, for sure.
Which is a very big deal for me.
I agree on that.
Definitely. Like, again, it's just stuff that I feel like it'd be great. Now, in kind of like, you know, in the inverse of that, or at least, you know, something to acknowledge, I don't want it to be kind of like a full-blown, like, you know, Mass Effect-esque type of RPG. Like, I don't want choices of dialogue for Link and stuff. Obviously, I still want to be told the story, and I still want to be shown, like, what happens in it and still be part of it and stuff. But I don't want it to go to, like, uber crazy territory where they start experimenting for stuff and start, like, impacting, like, you know, the core formula of what makes it so cool.
Yeah, I don't want to see that either, because it's a cinematic story in a lot of instances. And I mean, I'd just like to see him to have a voice, just like even just for cutscenes, just to establish what's going on in the story, and just so you can see him interact, and not so much like you make him like, oh, you can answer this question or this question or this question, because there are already games that do that. Zelda is its own thing.
Like, it does its own good stuff, but again, even though I'm okay and I'm cool with like game series trying different stuff, like, again, there's a certain point where you gotta kind of just stop and just kind of like, you know, understand what works enough and where it's too much. Like, you don't want to mix up and mess up an already good formula like that.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, that's just our thoughts on the Legend of Zelda series. Amanda, thank you for chatting it up with me about Zelda.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really appreciate it. Stuff. Where can everybody find you right now? Where are you at right now?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Amanda VanHiel. You can also watch me stream every Sunday on Zelda Universe TV on our Twitch channel. So twitch.tv/Zelda Universe TV. I have a show every Sunday night. Nice. And then usually around Sunday afternoon, sometimes Monday, just kind of dependent on like if there's like a holiday or something where we have to schedule around it. That's when Zelda news comes out. And so that's just a weekly rundown of anything Zelda that has happened throughout the week, whether it's game announcements, interviews, new merch that has come out, cool fan works, just all sorts of fun stuff like that. Just whatever's happened in that week is what I'm talking about.
Awesome. What are you playing right now on Twitch, or at least with the stream stuff? Like, are you playing a Zelda game or are you playing something else?
So lately I've been playing Breath of the Wild's Champion's Ballad. And nice. I'm almost finished with Champion's Ballad. And then, so initially I started the show as streaming games I had not played before. So that was my first time playing A Link to the Past was on a live stream.
Wow.
Because it had gotten to the point where I'd gone so long without playing it. I'm going, well, if I've never played it before, I need to document it that it's actually happening. And so next I'm going to start playing Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, or the new Captain Toad. For the Switch.
That's pretty dope. And fun fact for people that don't know, apparently that was supposed to be Link at one point. It was supposed to be a Zelda game, Captain Toad.
Oh, okay.
I remember reading a story about it where Captain Toad is just like, again, originally the concept where I think even the prototype pitch for them at Nintendo was that it was actually Link instead of Captain Toad that was doing that stuff. And then they eventually changed it around and went through a couple phases and it became Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, which is pretty crazy.
That's kind of neat. I think I heard something about that. Yeah.
That's pretty dope. But
I'm just imagining that being like a Zelda game, and now I can't see it as anything. As much as I always want more Zelda, I can't see it as anybody other than Captain Toad, because Captain Toad's so adorable.
Yeah, he is adorable. But I mean, it is kind of funny though when you think about a Link Treasure Tracker. Like, it'd be little Link too. It'd be a little chibi version of him. Like that.
I don't know, maybe they get Tingle to do it.
Yo, that'd be gangbusters. Get a Tingle Treasure Tracker. And the marketing does itself, as I'm just saying.
It really does. Tingle's Treasure Tracker. You've already got it in the title.
Nintendo, I know you're listening. Make this happen. I'm just saying.
We want Tingle's Treasure Tracker.
Final thought, though. Okay, I know obviously Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is coming out later this year or whatnot. I got to see it at E3. I don't know if you got to see some of the other stuff, or if you were at E3 or whatnot. But what do you want to see?
I got to play it.
Yeah, what do you want to see from Link in Smash Brothers Ultimate? Like, what was one thing that you could think of?
Oh, I just want to see the champions. I would love for them to like come forth as like a final Smash. That's what I would love to see.
That'd be pretty dope. That'd be pretty awesome. Make it happen, Nintendo. I'm just saying.
But, okay, come on, Nintendo. I know you can do it.
Amanda, thank you so much. Again, guys, if you enjoyed this episode of Definitive Discussion Rebooted, let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave a like on this video. And also, again, subscribe to my YouTube channel for all my videos like this, as well as also my game reviews and my vlogs. I'm uploading every single week for you guys to enjoy. Again, I'm trying to get new, cool stuff here on the channel for you guys to really enjoy and kind of really share around. Let me know also what type of guests and what type of topics you guys want to see on the show. I'm always open to new suggestions and stuff and trying to make the show really awesome. But either way, we will talk to you guys again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.